My name is Lila Monroe, and if you're reading this, it's because I've decided to finally tell the story of how a Harvard man nearly destroyed my life. Not just my career, though that was certainly on the line, but everything I had built from nothing. My reputation, my dreams, my hard-earned place at the table in an industry where women like me are still too often dismissed as lucky or naive. But let me be clear, I'm neither. I founded Bright Path Solutions 5 years ago with little more than a laptop, a half-baked idea, and a stubborn refusal to take no for an answer. We started small, offering data analytics tools tailored for mid-sized businesses looking to compete against corporate giants without breaking the bank. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest and effective. Over time, we grew. Word spread about our platform's ability to deliver insights faster and cheaper than anyone else out there. By last year, we were profitable enough to attract serious interest from investors who wanted to help us scale globally. And then came the deal, the one that would change everything. It all began on what should have been one of the best days of my life. The kind of day you dream about when you're working late nights alone in your apartment, wondering if any of this will ever pay off. A Fortune 500 company, let's call them Global Tech Industries, had invited me to their headquarters to present a demo of our latest product. This wasn't just another pitch. This was the culmination of months of tireless effort, countless sleepless nights, and endless rounds of revisions. If they liked what they saw, they'd sign a partnership agreement worth $90 million over 3 years. $90 million. For context, that amount of money could fund not only our expansion plans but also secure Bright Path's future for good. So there I was, standing outside their sleek glass building in downtown Chicago, clutching my laptop bag like it held the secrets to eternal happiness. Inside, I knew exactly what awaited me: boardroom tables polished to mirror-like perfection, suits so crisp they practically whispered power, and people whose names carried weight far beyond mine. But none of that mattered because today, I had something they needed. Something they couldn't get anywhere else. The meeting itself went better than I could have hoped. I walked them through every feature of our software, demonstrating its speed, accuracy, and ease of use. Their executives nodded approvingly, asking thoughtful questions and scribbling notes. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, a brief pause before someone said, "This is impressive." That single sentence felt like validation wrapped in gold foil. They asked for additional details, requested follow-up meetings, and even hinted at fast-tracking the contract process. As I left the building, I allowed myself a rare moment of pride. Maybe, just maybe, I'd done it. But here's the thing about moments like these: they can be fleeting. Fragile. One wrong move, one misplaced trust, and everything can come crashing down around you. And crash it did. 2 weeks later, I received an email from Global Tech's procurement team requesting clarification on some technical aspects of our proposal. Nothing unusual. It happens all the time during due diligence. What struck me as odd, though, was the tone of the message. Polite yet distant, almost clinical. Still, I didn't think much of it until I noticed something strange happening during subsequent calls. People who had previously been enthusiastic now sounded guarded. Questions once framed as collaborative suddenly took on an interrogative edge. Something was shifting beneath the surface, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Then came the day I'll never forget. I arrived at the office early, eager to review some final tweaks to our presentation, slides ahead of another round of discussions with Global Tech. My assistant handed me a printed copy of the agenda for the upcoming meeting. Scanning it quickly, I froze. There, listed under presenter, was a name I didn't recognize: Carter Whitmore. Below his name, in parentheses, it read, Harvard MBA, strategic consultant. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Who was this guy? Why was he presenting instead of me? Panic surged as I dialed Global Tech's mainline, demanding answers. After being transferred twice, I finally reached someone vaguely familiar, a junior analyst named Rachel. She hesitated before explaining that Carter had joined their internal strategy team temporarily to assist with vendor evaluations. He's reviewing all proposals, she added hastily, sensing my growing unease. Just protocol. Protocol? Since when did protocol involve hijacking someone else's demo? By noon, I'd pieced together enough fragments to understand what was really going on. Somehow, Carter Whitmore, a man I'd never met nor heard of until now, had managed to insert himself into the process. Worse still, he wasn't merely observing or advising, he was actively positioning himself as the face of Bright Path solution. Emails exchanged between him and Global Tech revealed a disturbing pattern. He praised our technology while subtly undermining my leadership, suggesting that perhaps I lacked the experience necessary to manage such a large-scale implementation. Experience? Let me remind you, I'd bootstrapped this entire company from scratch. Yet here was this stranger, armed with nothing but a fancy degree and a suit, trying to convince everyone, including me, that I wasn't up to the task. I called an emergency meeting with my core team back at BrightPath. Huddled around the conference table, laptops open and coffee cups steaming, I laid out the situation. At first, disbelief reigned. How could someone swoop in like this? Wasn't it illegal? Ethical? Logical? But as I shared screenshots of emails and recounted conversations, reality sank in. This wasn't just bad luck or coincidence. This was calculated sabotage. We debated options furiously. Should we confront Global Tech directly? File a formal complaint? Leak the story to the press? Each path carried risks, especially given the delicate nature of negotiations. Ultimately, we agreed on a two-pronged approach: gather evidence meticulously while simultaneously reinforcing our value proposition. If Carter Whitmore thought he could steal my thunder, he underestimated both my determination and the strength of the relationships I'd painstakingly built over the years. Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly to reclaim control. I reached out to key contacts within Global Tech, reminding them of the personal connection we'd forged during earlier discussions. I emphasized the unique insights our team brought to the table, insights no outsider could replicate. Meanwhile, my team dug deeper into Carter's background, uncovering troubling patterns. Turns out, this wasn't his first rodeo. He'd pulled similar stunts at other companies, leveraging his Ivy League credentials to worm his way into high-stakes deals. His MO was clear: identify vulnerable targets, exploit their weaknesses, and emerge victorious at any cost. Armed with this knowledge, I made a bold decision. Instead of waiting for Global Tech to make the next move, I decided to go on the offensive. I drafted a detailed letter addressed to their CEO, outlining everything I discovered about Carter's tactics. I included specific examples of how his interference jeopardized not only BrightPath's chances, but also Global Tech's ability to make informed decisions. Then, I attached copies of correspondence showing his attempts to discredit me. Finally, I closed with a plea, not for sympathy, but for fairness. If BrightPath isn't the right partner for your needs, I wrote, then by all means choose someone else. But don't let manipulative gamesmanship dictate the outcome. Sending that letter felt like stepping off a cliff. Would they see it as courageous or desperate, professional or petty? Only time would tell. In the meantime, I focused on shoring up internal morale. The last thing I needed was for my team to lose faith in our mission, or in me. So I rallied them, sharing stories of past victories and emphasizing the importance of resilience. Together, we tightened our pitch, refined our messaging, and prepared for whatever came next. And then, just as things seemed poised to explode, something unexpected happened. Carter Whitmore disappeared. No explanation, no apology, no farewell email. Just gone. Rumors circulated that he'd been quietly reassigned to another project, though official confirmation remained elusive. Whatever the reason, his abrupt exit left a vacuum, one I intended to fill completely. But even as relief washed over me, I couldn't shake the lingering bitterness. How many others had fallen victim to his schemes? How many brilliant ideas had been buried under layers of greed and ambition? More importantly, how could I ensure this never happened again? Not to me, not to anyone. As I sat alone in my office late one night, staring at the city lights twinkling outside my window, I realized something profound. This ordeal wasn't just about winning or losing a deal. It was about proving, to myself, to the world, that I belonged here. That despite the odds stacked against me, despite the barriers erected by those who doubted my abilities, I refused to back down. Because BrightPath wasn't just a company. It was a testament to perseverance, grit, and the unshakable belief that sometimes the hardest battles yield the sweetest victories. The weeks following Carter Whitmore's mysterious disappearance were a whirlwind of uncertainty and mounting tension. Global Tech had gone eerily silent, their usual flurry of emails and calls reduced to an almost deafening void. My team and I tried to stay optimistic, but the absence of communication gnawed at us like a persistent shadow. Every unanswered message felt heavier than the last, each day stretching longer than it should have. Still, we pressed on. There was no time for self-pity or second-guessing. If anything, this period of radio silence gave us room to regroup and refine our strategy. We revisited every aspect of our proposal, scrutinizing it with fresh eyes. Was there something we'd missed? Some angle we hadn't considered? If nothing else, this ordeal had taught me one thing: complacency could be as dangerous as any external threat. So we tightened our language, sharpened our visuals, and added new layers of data that underscored why BrightPath wasn't just another vendor. It was the only choice for Global Tech's needs. But beneath the surface, doubts lingered. Had my letter backfired? Did exposing Carter's tactics make me look vindictive instead of justified? And what about Global Tech themselves? Were they reconsidering the entire partnership altogether? The questions swirled endlessly in my mind, keeping me awake long after everyone else had left the office. Then out of nowhere came the call. It was Rachel again, the same junior analyst who'd first tipped me off about Carter's involvement. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, as though she feared being overheard. "Lila," she began hesitantly, "we need to talk." My heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. I braced myself for whatever news awaited on the other end of the line. She asked if I could meet her later that evening at a small cafe near Millennium Park. Not exactly corporate protocol, but given everything that had transpired, I didn't question it. Something told me this conversation would be worth the risk. When I arrived at the cafe, Rachel was already seated at a corner table, nervously stirring her coffee. She looked younger than I remembered, her wide eyes darting around the room as if expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. When she saw me approach, she gestured for me to sit quickly, leaning in close before I even had a chance to order. "First," she whispered, "you need to know, I didn't agree with how they handled things. None of US did." Her words tumbled out in a rush, as though she'd been holding them in for weeks. "Carter, he came in like a storm. He convinced upper management that your proposal needed oversight. That's code for taking over, obviously. But once people started seeing his methods," she trailed off, shaking her head. "Let's just say opinions shifted." I listened intently, my pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. Rachel glanced over her shoulder again before continuing. "After your letter landed on the CEO's desk, it caused quite the stir. They launched an internal investigation into Carter's conduct, not just with Bright Path, but with other vendors too. Turns out, he'd been pulling similar stunts for years. People are furious. Upper management is scrambling to contain the fallout." A mix of emotions surged through me: vindication, relief, anger, disbelief. All those sleepless nights, all those moments of doubt, they hadn't been for nothing. Still, I couldn't let myself get swept away by triumph yet. "So where does that leave us?" I asked pointedly. Rachel hesitated, then lowered her voice even further. "Here's the thing. Global Tech wants to move forward with you. But," she paused, choosing her next words carefully, "they're nervous. About optics. About backlash. About making sure this whole mess doesn't blow up in their faces. They're asking for guarantees. Proof that working with Bright Path won't expose them to more drama. Guarantees." The word hit me like a punch to the gut. After everything I'd endured, after proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that my company was the best fit for their needs, they still wanted assurances? It was infuriating, and yet not entirely surprising. Corporate giants like Global Tech always played it safe, always hedged their bets. But that didn't mean I had to make it easy for them. "Tell them this," I said firmly, leaning in so only Rachel could hear. "Bright Path stands by its work. Always has, always will. If they want guarantees, tell them to look at our track record. Tell them to talk to our clients. And tell them this: if they choose anyone else, they'll regret it." Rachel nodded, clearly impressed by my resolve. "I'll pass that along," she promised. "But Lila, tread carefully. They're watching your every move now." True to Rachel's warning, the days that followed brought increased scrutiny from Global Tech. Requests for additional documentation piled up. Questions about contingency plans multiplied. Even minor details, things we'd previously agreed upon without issue, were suddenly subject to debate. It was exhausting, maddening even, but I refused to buckle under the pressure. Instead, I doubled down, channeling my frustration into precision. Every response I sent was polished, professional, and unassailable. Every meeting I attended became an opportunity to remind them why they'd chosen us in the first place. And slowly, incrementally, the tide began to turn. Board members who had once seemed skeptical started nodding along during presentations. Executives who had questioned our capabilities began praising our transparency and adaptability. Even the procurement team, notorious for their nitpicking, softened their tone. It was subtle, but undeniable. Momentum was shifting back in our favor. Yet, despite these encouraging signs, I couldn't shake the feeling that the finish line remained just out of reach. Something, or someone, was still holding us back. One evening, as I pored over yet another round of feedback from Global Tech, a name caught my eye: Meredith Kane. Listed as a senior advisor to the CEO, she had emerged late in the process, offering input on everything from contract terms to implementation timelines. At first glance, her contributions seemed innocuous enough, a suggestion here, a critique there, but the more I analyzed her comments, the clearer it became. She was trying to undermine us. Subtly, Yes, but deliberately. Meredith Kane. The name rang a bell, though I couldn't immediately place it. Digging deeper, I discovered she was a former colleague of Carter Whitmore's, someone who had worked alongside him at multiple firms. Coincidence? Maybe. But in my experience, coincidences rarely existed in situations like this. This revelation hit me like a freight train. Just when I thought we'd cleared one obstacle, another loomed ahead. Only this time, it wasn't some flashy Harvard MBA playing games. It was someone far more seasoned, far more calculating. Someone who understood the art of sabotage better than most. Fury bubbled inside me, hot and searing. How much more were they going to throw at me? How many battles would I have to fight just to prove what should have been obvious from the start? But anger wouldn't win this war. Strategy would. And as I sat there, staring at Meredith's neatly typed notes, a plan began to form. One that would require every ounce of courage, cunning, and creativity I possessed. The next morning, I called an emergency brainstorming session with my team. Locking the conference room door behind us, I laid out everything I'd uncovered about Meredith Kane. Their reactions mirrored mine: shock, outrage, determination. Together, we devised a counterattack, one designed not just to neutralize her influence, but to turn the tables entirely. By the time we emerged hours later, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about securing a deal anymore. It was about sending a message to global tech, to Meredith, to anyone who dared underestimate me or my company ever again. Because let me be clear, I don't lose. Not when the stakes are this high. Not when the future of Bright Path hangs in the balance. And certainly not when the game is rigged against me. After weeks of relentless strategizing and navigating corporate politics, the tide finally turned in Bright Path's favor. Armed with irrefutable evidence of Meredith Kane's bias and her ties to Carter Whitmore, I confronted Global Tech's leadership during a pivotal board meeting. The room fell silent as I presented my case, calmly, methodically, and without hesitation. The CEO, visibly shaken by the revelations, made an unprecedented move. He publicly apologized for the mishandling of our proposal and vowed to ensure transparency moving forward. Within days, the $90 million deal was officially signed, with Bright Path named as Global Tech's exclusive partner. The victory wasn't just financial, it was personal. It validated every late night, every sacrifice, and every ounce of resilience I'd poured into building Bright Path. News of the win spread quickly, earning us industry recognition and attracting top talent eager to join a company that stood for integrity and innovation. As I stood on the rooftop of our new office space months later, overlooking the city skyline, I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. Bright Path had weathered the storm and emerged stronger than ever. But more importantly, we'd proven something invaluable. No matter how daunting the odds, standing your ground can shift the balance. And sometimes, justice has a way of finding you when you least expect it. It wasn't just a happy ending, it was a beginning.